Alright, good evening folks, it's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to another Short War video, and today we have very big news coming out of mainland Russia and also coming out of Ukraine as well. But by far our biggest piece of news of the day is we're hearing that Ukraine's launched another surprise offensive into mainland Russia, this time near Sudza in the Kursk region, and it looks like this one is moving very fast and the Russians are caught off guard by it, and they're already making gains as we can hear right now. So very big news on that front, and we have all the details to report here on the video, and also we have some very big news that Ukraine just received a new shipment of French and American fighter jets at the same time, which is extremely good news, and that's actually a surprise delivery of those jets today. We've also heard of a big attack on a Russian airbase, which houses a lot of crucial Russian air components for fighting the war in Ukraine, and we've heard of a small airplane crash outside of Moscow, and we've also heard of some attacks on some refineries and some more damage to report on that. But with that, we are now moving into our first post of the day, which goes to Samuel Romani. And as you can see right here in the post, this is very big news once again, and remember, Ukraine just launched a smaller offensive into Kursk just less than a month ago, so they're already launching a new major offensive around the area of Sudza. So it sounds like, according to the post, Ukraine's reportedly launched a new major offensive in Kursk, southeast of Sudza, and in our next post here, we're already hearing of gains being made by the Ukrainian forces. Apparently, the gains are being reported near Fanasivka and also Ulanak, and the Russian Defense Ministry is claiming 2 mechanized battalions from Ukraine are leading the charge, and already a gas pipeline has been damaged. So they're already making gains in this area, and it sounds like this is a much faster moving offensive than the one we saw less than a month ago. So the Ukrainians are already plowing through the area, but only time will tell exactly how far this one's going to go and what the objectives are. But we do have some more details about Russians complaining here about the conditions, and apparently the Russians are not able to respond the way they want to this attack, once again indicating they were caught off guard. And moving right into our next post, this one goes to Max24. And I'll be honest, sometimes it's hard to tell when the Russians are simply making excuses for why they're losing or if they're actually being serious, because they make excuses all the time. But here in this post, we can actually see that one of the Russians wrote on Telegram some complaints about fighting the Ukrainians in this brand new offensive that just started. And as we can see up here at the top, it said urgent, Kursk direction. They're warning everybody like Paul Revere, the Ukrainians are coming. But it looks like it says the enemy launched an offensive from the settlement of Makanovka, and the battles are already underway near the settlement of Ulanak, and the battles are very heavy, and the weather conditions for UAV are very poor. So boo-hoo for the Russians, they apparently can't launch their drones to counterattack the Ukrainians. That's tough for them. But it says here, according to the plan and what we see, the enemy wants to enter Cherkasy Konopelka, and also the enemy's already bypassed one of the towns, and they're moving straight onto Cherkasy. So it sounds pretty damn bad. It sounds like the Ukrainians are moving pretty fast, and the Russians were not ready for this, according to the post here on Telegram by Russian forces. But then again, when are the Russians ever ready for anything? Probably never, to be perfectly honest, but you know, there's just more proof they're not ready this time either, so once again, call it lacking. But moving on here to our next post, this one goes to Military News Ukraine. And in this post right here, we have a little bit more information about exactly where the Ukrainians are attacking, and not a whole bunch of actual details here, but we do have a general direction in which they're attacking. So let's take a look at the map and show you where this is. And as you can see right here in the blue, this is where the Ukrainians are already located, and the blue arrow here shows you exactly where they're moving into, and that red dot is exactly the city in which they're currently allegedly reportedly making gains on the Russian forces. And it looks like the Ukrainians are moving right up the highway here and moving on to maybe in the area of Sudza, or at least up a very populated highway in the area of Kursk. So I'll be perfectly honest, I don't have a ton of details right now exactly what the Ukrainians are planning to do, so hopefully by stream time tonight we will have more details on this to report to you all and generally give you an idea of where the Ukrainians plan on going. But just to recap real quick, we don't have a ton of details like I said, and we'll have to wait until later to get more numbers on the entire situation. But with that, we are now moving into our next article here, and this one goes to Samuel Romani once again. So right here in the post, we can see that Ukraine says it's captured almost 1,000 Russian troops in Kursk, and I assume that's since the beginning of the original Kursk offensive. And it also says here in the secondary post that 909 Russian troops have been accounted for, and Ukraine is leveraging these POWs to secure the release of its own POWs in regular exchanges. And even though Ukraine lost some territory in Kursk a short while back, it is still on the move as it recently struck a Russian command center in Kursk. And this post right here was actually made right before the offensive started in Kursk, this new one that we just saw today. So the Ukrainians are certainly still on the move, and while they may be losing a bit of territory here and there from the Russian forces retaking it, overall the Ukrainians are still pushing forward and putting the Russians on the back foot. So not good for the Russians once again, and yet again we're seeing more Russian troops being taken even right now. So that's very good news for the Ukrainians. But moving on here to our next post, This one goes to Null Reports. And speaking of good news for the Ukrainians, we have some extremely good news today, and we're hearing in the Post that the Minister of the French Armed Forces announced today that the first Mirage 2000 F-5 fighters have been delivered to Ukraine, and quote-unquote, with Ukrainian pilots trained for several months in France on board, they will now participate in defending Ukraine's sky, said the French Armed Forces leader here, the minister that is. But we can see that the Mirage jet, which is a very capable fighter jet, we don't know exactly how many have been delivered to Ukraine, but apparently the first batch has been delivered, and these are now in Ukrainian custody, and they can now be used to defend the Ukrainian mainland. So that is very good news on that front, and once again, France is stepping up to provide more jets to Ukraine to help them fight the war. But wait, that's not all. There's more to this deal, and in our next post here, which goes to the Kyiv Post, we heard that just hours after the French Mirage 2000 landed in Ukraine, Kyiv also received more F-16s from the Netherlands, confirmed the Dutch Defense Ministry. So once again, the beautiful F-16, which Ukraine wanted for such a long time, they are now receiving even more of those jets, and that is very good to see because the F-16 is very capable, and they're also building out the infrastructure inside of Ukraine to house the jets properly and maintain them to be in top-notch condition. So very good to see, and they've received a ton of fighter jets today between the French and also the Dutch as well. So very good news, and apparently they're still receiving even more jets, so that is fantastic news indeed. But with that, we're jumping into our next post here, and this one goes to Anton Yeroshenko. And it looks like the Russians have some bad news for them, though. They're not receiving F-16s, and they're also not receiving Mirages. Even though they may be seeing Mirages, they're not getting them. But it looks like Anton says that a Russian airfield was attacked by drones last night, and the AFU struck the Primorsko-Artaksk airfield in Russia's Krasnodar region, and this is an operational base for aviation assets used for storing, preparing, and launching Shahed-type UAVs against Ukraine, as well as servicing aircraft carrying out missions in the Zaporizhia and Kherson regions, and the local residents reported hearing loud explosions on Telegram. So we do have a very short video here showing the loud explosions in the distance at this airfield, so let's take a listen to it and see exactly how loud this was and how big these explosions were. Oh, bliat. It looks like there's some fire out here at this airfield here in Russia. It looks like they probably won't be able to launch some of those Shahed drones anymore. Tisk, tisk, tisk. What a shame for the Russians. Once again, the Ukrainians have struck and they've done some severe damage. And once again, good to see on camera. We got some video evidence of it this time. But anyways, with that, folks, let's go ahead and move on to our next post here. And this one goes to Max24. And we got some information here around Moscow. Apparently, a light aircraft crashed in the Moscow region. And according to Mesh, 2 people injured as a result of the plane crash in the Moscow region died, and apparently it all happened near an airfield right outside of Moscow, and the plane crashed into a field. So as you can see right here in the images, there is the wreckage from the plane crash. We're not exactly sure what this was about. Of course, there can be normal aviation accidents inside of Russia. This might have been one of them. It's hard to really tell though, but once again, we did see that today. So I'm actually going to spare you all the video. It's just literally a video showing these pictures right here, and you can see there's the wreckage from that plane. So just real quick to report that, in case later we determine that there's something fishy about it, you'll have seen that we reported it on today's video. But moving on to our next post here, we have some more details about a new oil refinery which has been knocked out of action for quite some time, and this post goes to Max24. And in this post, we're hearing that Lukoil's Volgograd refinery, which is one of the top 10 largest in Russia, suspended operations due to a drone strike on February the 3rd, which is just a few days ago, and repair work on the damaged areas is estimated to take 1.5 months. So this facility, which was struck about 3 days ago or so, is going to be out of action for about a month and a half, which is insane amount of time for this to be out. That's something that Russia can certainly not afford, and I feel like we say that all the time now. Russia really can't afford anything anymore. Anything like this can sink their whole economy, and this could be the one feather that breaks the camel's back in this situation. And with this particular refinery being one of the top 10 largest, this is certainly a big hit indeed, and we're hearing that it'll be out for quite some time. But just some more reports about refinery issues inside of mainland Russia. And moving on to our next post here, this one goes to the Euromaidan Press. And just a quick Frontline update for you all. The other day, we'd actually reported on the Short War video, in fact, it was about a day ago, that around Pokrovsk, the Russian advances, the small advances they were making, were coming to a dead halt, and today we're hearing that they've come to even a further halt, because according to our Frontline report from the Euromaidan Press, the Russian armored push near Pokrovsk ends in a loss of 9 vehicles within hours, and a single Ukrainian drone unit eliminated nearly 100 tanks, and over 1,000 Russian personnel personnel in January operations near Pokrovsk, according to the battlefield reports. So around Pokrovsk, that was a hopeful area for the Russians that they thought they were going to make some advancements, but it sounds like it's been halted, and they've lost a lot of men and also a lot of tanks in that area. So a lot of wasted manpower by the Russian forces trying to take a small bit of land, and they didn't even get to take it. So very demoralizing for the Russian soldiers, and yet even another loss for their ground forces, and they're not making much progress, and now they're having to fight back in Kursk in their home territory once again. So not going good for the Russians on the ground, and also not going good on the economic home front either. But moving into our next post here, this one goes to the Kyiv Independent. And another big piece of bad news for the Russians, speaking of the economic front, we're hearing that the Baltic states are cutting energy ties with Russia, and they're joining the European power grid, reports the AFP. And Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia will disconnect from Russia's power grid this weekend, which is just a couple of days away, and synchronize with the Western European network. So this is another big deal, once again cutting Russia's energy exports off from the European world, which will be very economically devastating to the Russians, even more so than they're experiencing right now. So the Baltic states are, for once, honestly, they should have been doing this a long time ago. They are not buying energy from the Russians any further, which makes sense, because if the Baltic states are really worried about a Russian invasion, then why keep funding the Russian government by buying their energy? So this is a very good move that should have been done ages ago, but at least now they're doing it. So I guess we can't complain too much, but they're now cutting off the Russian energy. But with that, we are now moving on to our next article, and this one goes to Null Reports. And we have some more news about the North Koreans, because apparently the North Koreans, which were taken and actually made prisoners of war in mass numbers by the Ukrainians because they lost so badly, and once again the North Koreans were losing so badly on the front lines, the Russians actually withdrew them from the front so that way they wouldn't get completely slaughtered. We're hearing today that Ukraine is ready to discuss handing over captured North Korean soldiers with South Korea, and they said we're open to dialogue with international partners, including South Korea, on the transfer to third countries. And honestly, this is a bit of an interesting situation here, because I thought that maybe Ukraine might return the North Koreans back to North Korea to put them back in that country, but it sounds like Ukraine might be handing over the North Koreans to South Korea, which is kind of interesting because now South Korea, I assume, will take them prisoner and maybe hold them there or try to trade them back to the North Koreans. I'm really not sure what the plan would be with that, but it sounds like South Korea might be willing to take the North Korean prisoners back to their country, which honestly I'm really not sure what to make of that. So we'll have to simply wait for more details on it to figure out exactly what the plan is, but it sounds like they could be going back to the Korean Peninsula, just not back to the north side. In fact, they might be going back to the south side, which is not the part where they're from. But anyways, jumping into our last post of the day, this one goes to Max24 yet again. And we have some news here about China, because China is not just sitting by and not helping Russia out whatsoever. Remember, China and Russia have a no limits partnership, which means that China is dedicated to help Russia out of bad situations, at least temporarily, that is. But it looks like China supplies Russia with critical components worth $13.6 billion, and China provides 75% of imports, according to recent reports, and supplies of microcircuits, electronics, and other components necessary for the Russian military industry are provided by China, and that China provides up to 90% of Russia's needs in microelectronics. So it sounds like, while most people are saying, oh, China's really not involved in the Ukraine war whatsoever, no, China is heavily involved in the Ukraine war. It's just in a real sneaky way. And they're providing here components critical to the war effort, which include microcircuits and electronics, which means the Russians can continue to basically build drones and other equipment using these Chinese provided supplies. So not good to hear, and once again, China is actively involved in the war, and they should be sanctioned for that quite heavily and also punished for it as well. So I think that will probably be coming up as well in the coming months, because China is Russia's only hope to keep the war going, and without China, Russia is only left with Iran and North Korea, which are two countries which are not exactly what you'd call powerhouses in the world sphere. But guess what, folks? With that is actually our last news article of the day. So I hope you found today's video informative, and before you leave, smack the like button, and also go leave a comment down below and say LSA to let us know you watched the video to this point, and let us know you enjoyed the video as well, or if there's something we can improve on, just leave a comment down below and let us know, because we enjoy reading those comments and we appreciate the kind words down there as well. And also, if you want to support the channel financially, you can go check out our Patreon page, and the link is in the description below for Patreon, where you can go and sign up for a monthly membership and support the channel that way, which is a very big help, of course, because we're largely crowdfunded by the viewers, and it's you, the viewers, that make this all possible. And once again, huge shout out to our Patreon supporters, and thank you very much for helping to fund our work and help keep us going as a channel. We appreciate that very much. And also, be sure to join us tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern for our next nightly war news stream. And with that, bye-bye for now.